There's just a very slight possibility that I may suddenly disappear completely. I mean, just black out. My internet, yeah, I know. so if that happens,
I'll just know either you've lost your connection or you've been raptured.
Marge, what if the rapture is coming and I haven't led a good enough life?
God wouldn't spring the rapture on us unannounced. He'd send a sign.
we'll talk a little bit about meditation. We'll talk a little bit about what we might call the serious stuff. But there's also a lot of humor in the universe. And I want to talk today about the way that the universe, this reality that we find ourselves in as human beings, really is very, very good at reflecting stuff back to us that is going on deep inside us.
I'm very, very fond of Homer Simpson. He, there's a particular moment in the awakening process that I think everyone comes to sooner or later. And I call it the Homer Simpson moment. It's the moment when you slap your forehead and you say, "Oh," which is when you for the most famous one perhaps is the canonical version is the Buddha after sitting under the great fig tree for 49 days and nights in his final marathon meditation, determined to awaken. And this is after years of trying to do all the things that people try to do on the spiritual path, trying to first, as a so-called prince's son, trying to have as much sensual experience and luxury as possible. Then that didn't work. That did not make life okay. So then he swung to the opposite. He's in the forest for 6 years and doing all this, extreme fasting and mortification of the flesh and so forth. That doesn't work. Then he sits under the tree for 49 days and he tries all the meditation tricks that he's learned from all his teachers, trying to concentrate and trying to clear the mind and all of that. It takes him 49 days basically to run out of gas or run out of petrol, as you people say. And so that he's got nothing left to try. And then he looks around and he goes, "Oh." Or as it's recorded in the sutras, how wonderful all things, all of existence is enlightenment just as it is. And that's it. We everyone has to come to that place. All our efforts to gild the lily, to improve the thing, to add something to make life spiritual, enlightened, okay, or to get rid of something, all of that is, in a sense, it's blasphemous. If there's such a thing as blasphemy, that's blasphemy, because what it's saying is, well, apparently God screwed up here, or the universe screwed up here, and it's up to little me, little Dean, or little Tim to fix it. Right. So all those efforts, who have all those efforts been coming from? They've all been coming from the ego. So it's when finally the ego runs out of moves and has to surrender, and you find out, oh, it was right here all along. How did I miss it?
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, you're able to communicate like that because you've been. I'm about to go back on exactly what you just said. You've been going through self-improvement and the spiritual path for some time.
Well, that's the other side of the paradox. The other side of the paradox is for the Buddha to find out that everything was fine, that everything was enlightenment, that there was no need to practice. He had to practice. I call it the paradox of practice. We do have to drive our little car across the desert until we run out of petrol. We have to do that. I see the job of the teacher or the guide as helping to, if possible, shorten a little bit that time. Until people run out of moves, maybe point out to them, wait, you've been doing this move for the last 10 years. Perhaps you've used that one up and you can move on.
People watching this are going to come at what we're talking here about from various different, from their own level of understanding. Obviously, they're coming at it from with their own perception of what's in this for me? What am I going to get out of this conversation? Can it help me on my path in some way? Some of them are coming at it at a very look, this is not a scale of, up here is better than down here. So it's not that. It's everybody's equal. But some are just learning about things like dowsing and meditation, for example. Some have mastered that. Some are maybe naturally far more sensitive and have had a very, very different experience of life and have seen things that other people have not experienced and other people really want to experience. So they're, kind of over here. And then there are those that are like, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, Dean. I completely get it. Yeah, and they help other people do the work. What would you say, addressing all three of those kind of areas of observation and interaction with what we're talking about here? What would you say to people about meditation and about particularly how does our external reality really echo what's going on in here and where we are and that famous
Good.
power of now, really?
Good. Okay, so that's two things. So the first thing, meditation, and for me that is the core practice. There are a lot of things in the spiritual world that can be just really fascinating. And I know that you've explored a number of them, and they all attract people for a reason. The people who investigate those things, they're not foolish, they're not misled. There's some juice in all of those things. But to me, if there's only one thing you're going to do, or the first thing to get to, it's meditation. Because meditation is the direct sinking into what we are and what life is in its core, in its essence, which is, for lack of a better word, beingness, isness. We before anything else, before we attend to our business, we have to take care of isness. And we could think of it this way. Usually we're caught up in behavior, action, and interaction within the environment. That's fine. That's great. We've got to do that. We've got to get up in the morning and go to work and cook breakfast and do all that. Great. God bless. A little bit, but at that level, things are finite. We find ourselves interacting with objects. They're finite. We're always looking at all these objects and our interactions, trying to get fulfillment out of them, trying to get a sense of safety and security out of them, which is difficult, actually impossible, because they keep moving around. There's a saying in the Buddhist tradition, all meetings lead to partings. Every marriage without exception ends in divorce or death, right? So you go to your favorite restaurant, you're so happy, this is the place you go to every Thursday morning for breakfast, and then they change chefs, and it's not that your favorite shirt turns into a dust rag, yada yada yada. So we look a little deeper. We go to beyond beneath, we can say, the level of doing and interacting in the environment. There's the level of thinking. We start exploring different ideas and philosophies, reading books about them. Now, on the level of thinking, things are a little more, thoughts are more fluid. They're more quiet. They're more flexible. They're less, in a sense, they're less subject to the vicissitudes of time and passing away than outer objects are. We can go to the library, we can read the works of Shakespeare, we can read the words of Jesus and the Buddha from millennia ago. Okay, but even then, that's still, we could spend many years looking for some kind of ultimate sense of safety and fulfillment there. But thoughts also move around. The thought that seemed brilliant and, oh yeah, that's it. Okay, just it's like our favorite restaurant, our favorite book. Oh, this is the one that just, makes my head explode with understanding and happiness. So I'll just keep reading this book. But no, that doesn't work, right? So we go deeper than, okay, behavior, thought. Deeper than that is feeling, the level of emotion, feeling even more fluid, even more quiet, more intimate, feeling closer to ourselves, right? Because I can read these words of Plato or these words of Aristotle, and I'm sharing them with the other people who read them. But these feelings are so deep. Some of them I don't even have names for. They feel very intimate, very close to who I am, right? But then even that is subject to change, and it's still, feelings are still finite. They're still, and there's something in us that thirsts for something that's not finite, that's something that's not changeable. So below even the level of feeling, there is, we could say, the closer to us than our most intimate feelings, our most private, unnameable feelings, is the level of being, where we just are. And when we just are, all of our previous concepts of ourselves, that, oh, I'm Dean, I'm male, I'm this many years old, I'm in this location, I've got all this history, all that melts away. This is what happens in meditation, that all that melts away. All of that had its own beingness, but it was, okay, beingness in the form of a couch, beingness in the form of breakfast, beingness in the form of a body, beingness in the form of all these thoughts and all these feelings. And now it's just pure beingness, just pure isness, pure I, not I a body, not I a mind or history, just the sense that everyone has. Everyone knows the sense of being I, before we even, had a sense as a child of being a boy or a girl or anything. And we're able to just marinate in that. And turns out that's the thing that has no boundaries. That's the thing that's not a thing. That's the thing that doesn't change. That's the thing that's not finite. That's the thing that, as my old teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, years ago, I heard him say, it's just nothing, but there's something very good about it. Right. So it has that flavor of, here it is. Here's what I was looking for. And in my experience, in my own practice and helping other people with their practice, it's the most, what I call natural meditation, what I've been lucky enough to learn from various teachers and various, venerable traditions, going back to Tibet and going back to India. And I call it, in, plain English, natural meditation. As far as I can see, that's the most direct path to that, because, well, the big mistake that most people make in meditation is trying to meditate. Trying to clear the mind, which is like trying to flatten out all the waves on the surface of the ocean, right? It seems to make sense because, I want peace, I want silence, and all these waves of thinking and feeling and interacting, they're so turbulent, so I better flatten them all out. That doesn't work. It just stirs up the water worse. Any effort to create a non-agitated state of mind is itself a form of agitation. That's the catch-22 of trying to meditate. So my main function as a teacher of meditation is, once again, let's see if we can shorten that path of frustration. And what I try to do is just pull the rug of effort out from under people so they go into free fall. What the big discovery is, you don't have to flatten out the waves on the surface. Just allow yourself to sink naturally a few feet below the surface, and there the water already always is and always has been silent, right? People, the big mistake we could say is you're trying to find the qualities of beingness, which is by nature silent, up here on the level of thinking and feeling. And what we do is we just say thinking, feeling, dog across the street barking, God bless, just remain as you are. I'm just going to settle down here. And yeah, that's somewhere in the background. It's fine.
If people want to...
Let me mention before we leave this, if I may, that I lead meditation sessions on Zoom, normally 3 times a week in different time slots. I think a lot of your viewers or listeners are in the UK and Europe. My Friday morning one is at 10:30 a.m. my time, which is something like early evening your time. So I get a lot of people from the UK, Europe. Recently started getting a guy from Croatia tuning in. So,
excellent.
So everyone's invited. It's always free. It's open to everyone. Requires no skill, no background.
That's fantastic, because that's actually what I was about to say, was that if people want to kind of pick up on some of your fantastic wisdom and your expertise in that area, then pop over to your website. So that is deanslyter.com?
Deanslyter.com.
So meditation, there's your wonderful description. You described it wonderfully there, that experience of meditation and that where we look for that stillness, and actually it's there for us all the time if we can just allow ourselves to drop into that state. Some people will be thinking, well, it's all very well for you, Dean. Your practice of that, I've been trying for years, but that's fine. What I'm going to say is, please, go over to Dean's website, find the meditation practice that you offer there, and as you say, it's free. Get involved in your meditation sessions, because actually you are bound to find that anybody that's always had trouble with meditating, that actually Dean will be able to help you get into that state pretty quickly.
I've worked with so many people who've in some cases, their sincerity is heartbreaking. They've been doing this for years, but so much of the way meditation is taught is in terms of effort and trying to create, one-pointed concentration and still the mind and all that. And, when I show them how easy it is when you take it easy, it's just such a relief.
Yeah, it's back to that dope moment again, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is.
I tend to promote meditation because what I do a lot of these days is to teach people to do dowsing, to access information from a remote location. And in order to do that, you need that degree of concentration, and it's you need to be dropping into that sort of intuitive level. We might use the term quantum 0-point field if we were talking in sciencey ways, but to actually access remote information from a place, so you need to be in that meditative state in order to do that. Now, when we're in the meditative state, we are enjoying reality at a different level, at a different state of consciousness, effectively. And one of the things that we feel, do feel free to disagree with me on this, but is that we have that oneness, we can feel that oneness, the unity of everything, the unified consciousness of everything. When we're awake and going about our day-to-day stuff on a very non-meditative way, the oneness is still there, and it's still talking to us. And I suppose what people sometimes describe as, the universe sent me a message, is the oneness breaking through into our awareness in a very conscious level, in a day-to-day monkey chatter mind kind of way. You've written a couple of books about the way that creative endeavors in the past, whether they be movies or book or written novels or whatever, also carry spiritual messages, if you are open to seeing those in those books, in those works of creative art, we can pick up information that the universe is really showing to us and sharing with us. And it seems to do so with a certain degree of intention of itself. So it's almost as though it has an intelligence that is reflecting back to us. Mm-hmm. There's an aspect of the oneness even in that state of being, isn't there? Even in the day-to-day normalness of us being human beings.
Where is the infinite not? Right. By definition, if I said that the infinite, the oneness, God, the Tao, Brahman, whatever, pervades and is. Even to say pervades is dualistic. Like it sounds like that pervades the universe. There's the universe, and then God is somehow injected into it as another ingredient. There cannot, by definition, there cannot be anything but the infinite, and it just in a sense we could say keeps making it's all God making different faces at us. In the Hindu tradition, you have all these gods, these different forms, these different rupas, some of which are on my little altar over there. But it's clearly understood that all of these are just different forms of the one formless, the way that it might look to us, looking at it as it were from different angles. So it should not be a surprise that we can walk around outside of our time of sitting with our eyes closed meditating and encounter the infinite. It should be a surprise that we ever are under the delusion that we're encountering anything else. And I think it's helpful to look at a word that you used once or twice there, state, right? It makes sense that initially we think of meditation as a state. And in fact, some of the traditional literature, because the traditional literature, the texts and the scriptures speak at these different levels. And from the more starting off level, it's a state. It's as if we look up at the sky and sometimes, the state of the sky today is rainy. Now the state today is cloudy. Now the state today, finally the clouds have parted and here's the boundless blue sky, right? So that's the state that in the traditional literature is called turiya. It's called the fourth state because there's waking, dreaming, sleeping, and then the fourth state, turiya, where you're not waking, not dreaming, not sleeping. It's really the sinking into the isness, just pure isness, pure awareness, not awareness of anything. There's no plot line, there's no objects, just okay. So that seems to us like a state. And it's very exciting to add this new state to our life where finally everything is okay and finally things are fulfilling and well, it's not things, finally just fulfillingness sans things, without things. Okay. And it seems like this new special state, and we get very excited and we write or read spiritual books about it and so forth, this new special thing. The more familiar we become with it, the more we realize that, that boundlessness of the sky is the reality all the time. Sometimes I haven't been seeing it because the clouds and the rain and the snow have been intervening, but the nature of the sky is always boundlessness. So in the same way, the nature of life, the nature of existence, and the nature of what we call I is always boundlessness. And it makes perfect sense that the more we practice not just meditation, but the integration, the sinking in, marinating in that boundlessness in this effortless way for a while in natural meditation, and then coming out, some of that recognition sticks to us. And more it sticks to us. And in a usually, for most people, a very gradual, incremental way. it kind of percolates into all of life. So it makes perfect sense that if we make a pretty regular practice of taking some time, ideally every day, to marinate in this boundlessness, which is the nature of our own being, the nature of all being, so-called meditation, to give it a fancy polysyllabic name that makes it sound much more complicated than it is. It makes sense that if we keep doing this and then coming back out into activity, that some of that recognition sticks to us. Our nervous system is, because it loves that, because it's so delicious, it wants to keep reflecting that experience, and more it does, even as we're walking around with our eyes open, going about our business. So meditation becomes the prerequisite for skillfully, happily, effectively doing not only what we might consider the more exotic activities that you're talking about, remote seeing and so forth, great, but also, if what you're doing is raising your children in an intelligent, compassionate way, or what you're doing is playing music or writing books or selling real estate.
Okay, let's pull this across to one of your books, right? So what caught my eye on your press release actually was the fact, or I saw it on Amazon, was Cinema Nirvana, Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies. The reason that caught my attention was because I used to be involved in video production professionally and that side of things. So it's like, oh, the guy's into movies. Great. Now, in that book, in 2005, Cinema Nirvana, you, let me just read this for the benefit of the viewers. Movie fans and spiritual seekers unite in Cinema Nirvana. Meditation teacher and award-winning film critic Dean Sluyter illuminates the hidden enlightenment teachings of Casablanca, Jaws, The Graduate, The Godfather, Memento, and 10 other classic films, revealing spiritual wisdom in everything from 007's secret weapons to the colors of the seven dwarfs' eyes. Now, if that doesn't get people interested in reading the book, I don't know what will. Tell us about this book and about what you were doing in this book and about how you found these, or you got these spiritual revelations from these movies.
Right. Well, what I was doing with this book was having a big barrel full of fun. Starting with the cover, which, by the way, the cover was my concept, and I was a little nervous about it because for those who are maybe listening to this on audio, the cover shows a golden Buddha clutching a box of popcorn. And I thought, gee, is this too irreverent? So I went to my Buddhist teachers and I asked them, is this okay? And they said, yeah, it's fine. So yeah, what I did in this book was I had fun. So for one thing, when friends heard that I was writing a book on the spiritual content of movies, they said, oh, you've got to write about the Matrix, and you've got to write about Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, and all this very obvious stuff. So I kept a list of all the books the movies that people told me to write about, and I made a point of not writing about any of those.
Right.
Because for one thing, if the spirituality, for lack of a better word, if the spiritual content, the revelation of the infinite speaking through the finite, if it's overt, if it's deliberate, it's very hard to do that without being cheesy. And also, to me, when the spiritual content is deliberate, that's not very interesting. It's not very significant. So to me, it's much more significant to look at movies or books or rocks or botanical samples or anything where no one intended there to be a spiritual message or spiritual content. The model for me is there's a Zen mondo, a Zen story about the monk who goes to his teacher, his Roshi, and asks a kind of a classic question that you're supposed to ask your teacher, which is, what is the Buddha? Not who is the Buddha, but what is the Buddha, meaning what is the nature of enlightenment? Where is it to be found? And the Roshi could reply, oh, the Buddha is the beautiful sunset, or the Buddha is the deep silence you find sitting in the temple, which would also be correct, but that's too easy. That's low-hanging fruit. So what the Roshi replies is, the Buddha is a pile of cow shit in the middle of the road. Okay, which of course that must also be true, but can you see that that's, from a teaching standpoint, that's much more useful an example, because if you can see it in the pile of cow shit, you see it everywhere. So in Cinema Nirvana, I made the point to write about Jaws, The Godfather, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Casablanca, all classic American films, but films that we would never suspect have that Enlightenment content.
Is there? Are you able to remember any aspects of any of those main movies that you mentioned there that you could give an example of? Or
Sure.
is it? Yeah.
Oh, sure. For example, and you know, there's the old saying, God is in the details, which is something that I really learned from a wonderful Buddhist teacher of mine. He's a Swiss teacher named Charles Genoux. And I traveled with a small group with him through Tibet many years ago, and we went through dozens of temples, and he was pointing out, oh, he's a world recognized expert on this. He's written books on the iconography, and all the little details of every icon, every statue, every Tonka painting. So I tried to apply the same kind of iconographical approach to American movies. So, for example, rewatching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, I realized 5 of the dwarfs have brown eyes. One of the dwarfs, Dopey, has baby blue eyes. The 7th dwarf is Grumpy, who all he has is little dots, little black dots. He has no pupils at all. Now, what are those dwarfs? What are those dwarfs tell us about ourselves, right? You could, I can see you one day and say, hi, Tim, how are you? And you say, I'm sleepy, right? And then another time, I'm happy. And then another time, I'm grumpy. I'll say, Tim, make up your mind. You keep, who are you? You keep saying, first you say you're this, then you say you're this. So it turns out that happy, grumpy, sleepy, sneezy are not what we are. They are ways that we express. They are modes of expression. Now, we probably won't completely identify with I am happy, except that when these states start to become traits, when they're there for a longer period of time, we start to identify with them. And we say, I am male, I am female, I am whatever, I am Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or atheist or whatever. I am a Democrat, I am a Republican or a Tory or a Laborite or whatever. But here's the question. When you are sound asleep, in the state of deep dreamless sleep, are you Labor or Tory? Right? You're none of the above. Are you Jewish or right? You're none of that. All those things that we think we are simply ways that we express. They are not inherent to our isness, to our very existence. Our very existence has no traits. It has no qualities. It's pure. It's Snow White. Okay. And then I go into detail how, they got their 7 little beds. And when they first find Snow White, she's lying athwart the 7 beds. She's that missing ingredient that unites them, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when the dwarfs are first come home from working in the mine, And of course, I go in great detail. What does working in the mind mean, and so forth. When they come, who's Prince Charming? Who's the wicked stepmother? All of this I unpack in, I think, delicious detail. But when the dwarfs come home and they realize, wait a minute, there's a smoke coming out of the chimney. Someone's in our house. Some intruder is there. Who shall we send on the reconnaissance mission? They're all frightened. And this is a very natural thing. When all our life we've been identifying with our changing states and traits, we've been identifying with all our modes of expression. When now this new to us element comes in, it's actually the oldest, the eternal true nature of what we in life have been all along. But when it first comes onto our radar, we may be afraid of it. Right? So who do we send? Who do they send upstairs to find Snow White sleeping, lying across the beds? They send Dopey with his baby blue eyes, because this is the way to enter meditation, which is innocently. This is where in Zen they say, the Zen mind is beginner's mind. Don't go into meditation with your expert mind and your skill and your preconceptions and your effort. Just go into Dopey, right? In fact, for years I practiced in a Tibetan tradition, the Dzogchen tradition, where you're encouraged to meditate with your eyes wide open and your jaw hanging open like this. Wow. And one of the advantages of it is it makes you feel really stupid, right? Like you just give up on the intellect. Now, Doc, who he keeps trying to be the leader of the dwarves, right? That's the intellect. The intellect has its place; it has to be there, right? Doc always trying to turn everything into a doctoral dissertation, but he keeps using long words, but he keeps mixing them up. Right. He keeps getting his tongue all tangled up, and he's wearing spectacles to show he's an intellectual. But if you look carefully, you see the spectacles don't match his eyes. Right? The intellect is the wrong tool for that job. Grumpy is the one part of us we need all those traits. We need the part that's sneezy, that expels foreign objects. We need the part that's sleepy, that just takes a break from the whole thing sometimes, etc. We even need the part that's grumpy. That's the bullshit detector. The part that's cynical, that not everyone who comes and says they've got some message from the universe, and especially if the message involves me, making large deposits into their Venmo account, not all, we need the grumpy, the cynical grumpy part. And grumpy is the one who resists having Snow White come into their life. But near the end of the film, when Snow White eats the poisoned apple, and they all think she's died, and they're all standing there at the side of her bed, weeping. And the one who weeps the most bitter tears is Grumpy, the one with the little black dots, the one who literally does not have pupils, does not have the mechanism to let in the light. Right? That part of us that is so resistant to the light, when we're deprived of it, misses it the most. So that's the kind of thing I do in this book.
That's fantastic. That is so fantastic. I will have to go and rent a copy of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and watch it again with yes, definitely. And that sort of interrogation or examination of a creative piece of work there, the movie being the creative piece of work. It's a teaching process. Obviously, you've written the book, you've had fun writing the books, that and the Dharma Bum's Guide, which is a similar thing. Would I be right in saying that's a similar process with things like Catcher in the Rye, Moby Dick, and the Bluest Eye? Okay. Yes.
So let me hold this one up to the screen.
Yeah.
Yes, this one also I had a lot of fun. This one in particular, because I spent 33 years teaching English at a what here in the States we call a private school. I believe that's what you all call a public school.
That's right.
We have the terminology reversed.
Yeah.
And I would, every year I'd come back, okay, I'm going to teach Huckleberry Finn again. I'm going to teach the poetry of Emily Dickinson again, and so forth. So you do that for 33 years, you have an opportunity to get deeper and deeper into it. And if what you're doing when you're not teaching school is you're off on meditation retreats with all these yogis and lamas, you start to make the connection. So that's what happened for me. So yeah, I take the poetry of John Donne, which I fell in love with way back when I was in high school, and Frederick Douglass with his slave narrative, The Great Gatsby, Moby Dick, all of that, and unpack it in Enlightenment terms.
Fantastic, yeah. And I suppose what's interesting there is that I often talk a lot to my subscribers about the way that life can be broken down and looked at symbolically, and what is life telling you, what is the situation that you find yourself in, or the activity that you're involved in telling you about the way that you are internally. And of course, really what you've done is you've created these two amazing pieces of work, these two books, as amongst your other array of books that you've written. But these really are a reflection of your fascination and your development, your spiritual development. It's very much a very personal thing. And equally, we can look at it in this symbolic way of saying, right, well, there's a bit of Dean over there. That's a little bit of Dean with that book. Fantastic. What am I getting at? I suppose what I'm trying to get at is, do you talk to your students, to the people that visit your workshops and your meditation practices, about the way that reality can really be a very constructive guide if we're just open to seeing what it's telling us about ourselves? I mean, obviously, that's what you've been saying to us since we started this interview. But I mean, on a very practical, non-spiritual sort of way, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, everything is our meditation. Everything we do is our practice, is our Dharma practice, our spiritual practice. I talk a lot about marriage when it's appropriate, because I've found, I've been married to two wonderful women. My first wife passed on in 2004. But what I've found is that marriage, if you use it, is this great, among other things, this great mirror. You can, I've found that in the periods of my life when I've lived as a bachelor, it's very dangerous, because I can persist in, there's no one there to tell me I'm wrong. There's no one there to bounce the, in marriage, you've got this instant karma feedback loop of everything you do, and you can do things that you thought made sense, or you can do things that you thought were kind and considerate, and you find out that, whoops, no, I missed the mark. There's this wonderful Greek word, amartia, which means off the mark, like when you shoot an arrow at the target and you miss the bullseye. That's the word that in the most Bible translations that we're aware of in English has been translated or mistranslated as sin. Right? Isn't it right? Whew, that's a relief, isn't it? this whole business that, sin, it's this horrible stain, this thing, like when we were little kids in grade school, you've got cooties, like, the cooties of original sin. How will we ever get rid of this stuff? We've got to wash it in the blood of some savior or something. The word just meant missing the mark, which is, okay, I missed, let me look at how I missed, how far off am I, in what direction, let me readjust and recalibrate for the next time. And so marriage becomes a wonderful, if you use it that way, instead of just getting huffy, it becomes a wonderful opportunity to do that. But so is work. So is creative work. You're working at the potter's wheel, or you're working at playing your saxophone. You blow the note a certain way, and gee, that doesn't sound so good. Oh, I've got to adjust my embouchure or my fingering or whatever it is. Keep adjusting.
Terrific, because that also that's terrific. That's a great example, marriage. I've never really thought about it like that, but it's that wonderful thing about the ancient Taoists or the Taoist teachers that would say, life is a series of just taking action and watching the Tao, the great Tao, react, action, reaction, which again takes us back to movies, of course, if we think about editing styles and things. But it's all about that process. And what you've just described is doing that in the marriage, using that and looking at what's happening, using it as the gauge, reacting, changing, addressing I'll use the word, the sin, the missing the mark, and using it as that gauge. And that's really what we've been talking about for the last 50 minutes or so, is about finding our way, understanding that we don't need to necessarily expend a lot of energy on finding or looking for the way, because it's right here with us, isn't it? That's really
it's right here with us. It's right here all around us. It's right here us. It's as in all our frantic seeking for God, our frantic seeking for the infinite, we're like a bird flying around looking for the sky.
Yeah.
And the bird also is made of sky.
Yeah. Wonderful. And we're going to leave it there. Your insights are brilliant. There's just so lovely, and on the hitting the button right on the whatever that expression is. I definitely will be cutting this bit out.
No, I love that. No, keep this in. This is good. Hitting the button.